Hi, I'm Charlie Guarino. In this month's iChime meeting, we welcomed user interface developer for IBM Ann Wilkerson. In the meeting, Ann showed us how easy it is and intuitive it is to manage an IBM system using Navigator for IBM. It's a tool that you already have on your machine and should be able to get to quite easily. The tool does offer a variety of things to manage, and I highly encourage you to take a look at it, watch the video. You're really going to enjoy it. And thank you for your participation. It went over so well, and we all loved having you. Thank you.
So what we're looking at right now on my screen is what we have sort of called New Navigator. This version that you see came out in 2021, so it's not exactly new anymore. And what we're looking at today is also what is available in our Q4 PTF that went live in the latest HTTP group. So if you've even looked at Navigator before and you're looking at my screen, it might look a little bit different because we've done some work to change the look of it in our Q4 PTF. But just as kind of a reminder of the difference with New Navigator versus Heritage Navigator, or even going back to System I Navigator, the new version of Navigator is a full-blown web application. Previous versions of Navigator used to be Windows PC clients, and then Heritage was kind of a web application, but we just took that old code and threw it up into a web browser, which was not exactly web-based. It was more web-based than it was a web application. So here with New Navigator, we finally have a full-blown web application that is using Java still in the back end, but we're using Angular in the front end to render all of these really interesting screens. The other big difference between older versions of Navigator and this one is that this one is really built to manage multiple nodes, which just looking at my screen right now, we can see that we've rang true on that promise to make managing multiple nodes easier. So all of these different nodes that you're seeing on my screen are just different partitions that I have access to, and I can dive in and manage one of them, view information, change information, and then switch between them really easily. So let's go ahead and do that. This UT25BP22 is what we call the GUI node, and if you notice in my browser URL, UT25BP22 is the system where admin1 is running, and admin1 is the server that is running the Navigator instance. But if I go back to my dashboard for a second, all of these other nodes are just endpoint nodes, and they do not need to have admin1 running. And I'm just making host server connections and JDBC connections to these other nodes in order to do whatever I want to do, see whatever I want to see on those systems. And so that's a really nice thing for a system administrator to know, that you don't have to have admin1 running on a production system and eating up all of those precious resources. That can be sitting on a different partition, but you can still manage that production node through Navigator. Now, most of what we do in Navigator is kind of table-based. So if I just jump into active jobs, for example, we can see this is a table view of active jobs. Let me collapse. Another difference between Heritage Navigator and New Navigator is now in New Navigator, we're eating our own cooking when it comes to IBM services. So a lot of these table views are really just spit out information of what you could find in a service. And so I kind of went a little bit fast, but I clicked on that View SQL button on the top right of the screen, and that popped up this nice little visual. And here I can see that the SQL we're running to generate this table is qsys2.activejobinfo. Now, we made the change from the Java APIs to services because, for one thing, they're a lot faster than the Java APIs. And two, Navigator becomes a place for you to go and look for SQL that you can use and abuse. And we make it really easy to use and abuse this SQL because we've added these links to run the SQL in VS Code or run SQL in Access Client Solutions. So this is kind of pivoting into what's new here too. This run SQL in VS Code is a newer option. I'm not sure if it came out in our Q3 PTF or a Q4, but if you don't see it, it's likely because you're not current. But if I were to click on this, I don't even need to have the extension, the VS Code for I extension set up and configured. This is just going to open up this SQL in a little VS Code window for me. But if I have the DB2 for I extension set up and running, it'll actually go and run this SQL and spit out that output into VS Code. And I didn't really need to do anything but set up that DB2 for I extension. Now, the run SQL and ACS option, you need to set up ACS to listen for requests from Navigator. And then this will kind of do the same thing. It'll pop open run SQL scripts, and you'll have the ability to view that SQL and do whatever you want with it from there.
Hey, Ann,
Yeah.
and just to be clear, so everybody understands, these are just available as PTFs. This is not part of the TR. These are just come out as PTFs. Is that true?
Correct. So Navigator, we have individual PTFs for Navigator, but we bundle them within the HTTP group. And at the end of the meeting, I can find a link to our documentation that has all of the PTF numbers and a bunch of other goodies, and I can stick that in the chat for everybody so you can see what you need to get current on.
So once I have these PTFs loaded, I'll be able to everything you're showing here. It just appears automatically.
Yes, restart admin 1, and then sometimes clear your browser cache. It depends on you and your browser sometimes, and then you should see everything that I see.
Perfect. Thank you.
So that's kind of the structure of Navigator when it comes to the multiple nodes, and then kind of what we're doing behind the scenes where we're running SQL to generate these tables. Now, I would say probably 80 or 90% of what we do is based on SQL services. And so you'll always see this View SQL button. And sometimes that View SQL button is grayed out, and that's because you're looking at some information that is not pulling from SQL services. So there's still some stuff where we're actually going and calling APIs, or we're running CL commands. That stuff still exists in Navigator too. Now here, I'm looking at active jobs. Like I said, most of what you're going to see in Navigator is tables, and so this is just a great example of the kind of information that you might be looking at. Even within this page, there's a lot of things that you can do to customize your view and get the most out of Navigator. All of these columns, you can drag and drop to reorder them. Maybe I really care about elapsed CPU percentage. And if I click on this 3 dots menu in the right-hand side, it's going to show me all of the columns that are available to me. And these are all of the columns that are coming from that SQL service. So you can see for this active jobs one, there's quite a handful of columns that I can choose. We've gone through, and when we design these pages, we try to pick the best columns that we think most people are going to get the use out of. But obviously, what we think is good might not be what you think is a good idea, and so you can come in here and do that customization.
And I have another question, please.
Yeah.
The question that I have is, because these are all now many of them using SQL services, if I'm downloading the PTFs, are there complementary PTFs that need to come down as requirements, for example, for DB2 to get these services to work properly? Or do they come down automatically? How does that all work together?
Good question. So we do not prereq or co-req any of the PTFs for Navigator with the PTFs for the service, but it's a good idea that you stay current on your Java PTFs and on your database PTFs, because that means you'll be getting the latest and greatest of the database services as well. If there's ever a service that Navigator is using and you don't actually have, then you'll get some sort of error that just says that that service can't be found. And that would be a good indication that you might be a little bit behind on your database PTF group as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So all of these columns, I just went back, all of those columns are saved into your user preferences. So I just exited that page, and when I come back in, we can see that that elapsed CPU that I moved over from the right-hand side is still dragged to this new spot. So you can create these customized views of all these different pages to come back to whenever you want, and that's all saved. Another thing you can do to customize your view is if you're filtering or if you're sorting on different columns, for example, maybe I really care about my own active jobs, I can save this view of the table as a favorite by clicking this Add to Favorites list. And we'll just call this Active Jobs for Ann. And you'll notice that Save this table's current filters is already selected. So if I just hit OK, that favorite was added successfully. Okay, so it kind of disappeared into thin air. But let's say I'm doing something else. Maybe I'm looking at connections. And I'm like, oh, I really want to look at my active jobs. If I go up to this star and click on it, this will give me the list of things that I have favorited in the past. And here we can see active jobs for Ann. And if I click on that, again, we're right back to the active jobs page. And the current user is set to AE Sisla, myself. And so there we go. I can also switch between systems and maintain that filter. If I go down to this bottom up arrow, it's really small, really hard to see. And if I double click on another system, for one thing, now we're looking at data from Common 7.5 as opposed to this UT25 BP22. So a very easy way to just switch the system, and I'm still viewing the same kind of set of information. And then I had that filter for my username, and my filter is maintained. So a whole different system, whole different view of the world. But here, now I'm just switching across different systems, and it's a very easy way to see what's going on across multiple places.
There's something in the chat there that I'll just read out loud if I can just get my chat. Give me 1 second, please. In a previous version, I could navigate to a print queue that may have some PDFs in it. I was previously able to export those to the IFS. How to do this in NewNav?
Print queue. Let's see. We have output queues. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find one that has some stuff in it.
Yeah, I know, especially on that test machine. And that's okay. Yeah. But can you just can you describe the process if you're not sure?
Yeah, so I believe it's going to live in this printer output section. So I chose my output queue, and then I have printer output, and then I have the ability to view, if I were to select one, I'd have the ability to view that as a PDF. And then I believe export will do what you want to actually send it to the IFS.
Okay. I mean, that sounds very natural. You know, something that would be the expected. If I didn't know how to do it, that would be the path I would. It seems like a very logical, expectation.
The other thing you can do is in this search bar, let's see if printer output will pop up. So if I type in printer, it gives me the option for my printer output. And now we're going to look at whatever I have to do. So I guess here we could see export. Yeah, to the IFS. Perfect. So that's how I could get there. But this is only for my own printer output. Otherwise, if I know I'm looking for output queues, output, and it'll pop up with output queues there. So the search bar is a nice way to maybe try and find what you're looking for. I always say it's not as good as a Google search. It's just a bunch of text strings that we've put into the search bar there to try and help you find the links to different pages. But if you kind of have an idea of what you're looking for, you can put some words in the search bar and it should take you to where you need to go. Because this is actually kind of a good segue into the what's new. We have gotten a lot of feedback over time about these icons. So before the Q4 PTF, the whole left-hand menu looked a little bit more like this, where you would have to hover over each one of these different icons and then try and figure out what they mean, go into these sub-tabs. So now we've added the ability to kind of expand this and collapse it so you can actually see words that correlate to these different icons. So now I know, okay, this weird line and dot thing is network. I expect to see network things in this menu, and then you can drop down and find out more information about network stuff. So it's made it a lot easier to get around in Navigator because these icons make sense to me, but that's only because I've been developing this for like 2 years. It's, if you don't know, then you don't know. And so we've tried to make that a little bit better for people.
Seems very intuitive now.
Yeah, much, much better. I'll just highlight a couple other things that we've been working on that we're pretty excited about. Actually, within this network tab, you'll notice we have web administration. So the web admin GUI has existed for a very long time. And I'm not saying that that's going to go away, but we're trying to pull the functionality from web admin GUI into Navigator, so Navigator can become this centralized place where you're doing all of your configuration for your system. So you don't have to switch between Navigator and then go into web admin GUI. It's just kind of difficult if you have to have so many of these things open. And so that is something that our team has been working really hard on for the last couple of months.
I have another question, Ann.
Yeah.
And the question, what OS are you working on right now on the machine you're attached to? Is it 4 or 5, 7.4, 7.5? Do you know?
This is 7.4.
So the question I'm really getting is, does it look the same in 7.4 and 7.5? Does it look exactly the same?
Yes. Yeah. Navigator is the same across all levels of the operating system, 7.4, 7.5. The only thing that changes is when you're looking at an SQL service, for example, that might have a new column in 7.5 that didn't exist in 7.4. Navigator will handle that. And if you're looking at a 7.5 system, you'll see the column. If you're not, then you won't see the column. So those types of things we do handle, but for the most part, the look and feel is exactly the same.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so web administration, the application servers is probably the most exciting thing because you have the ability to view the different endpoints for the application server and see if they're TLS enabled or not. And then we also have the ability to configure TLS for these application servers now as well. So that's a really, I think for me personally, that's the only reason I go into web admin GUI, and bringing this into Navigator now, you can secure all of your different servers on all of your different instances, all of your different partitions from Navigator, and which is pretty cool.
And we're not going into the weeds, and I see there's a wizard there, so you can have it walk you through the steps to get that done.
Yes, exactly. So the same kind of wizard that exists in web admin GUI exists in Navigator now. Obviously, it looks a lot different. It's kind of the Navigator look and feel as opposed to the web admin GUI. But there are some kind of interesting things in here where, since we're pulling in all of this functionality into Navigator, we have the chance to really evaluate if it still makes sense, if it still works the best, if it's the most intuitive. And then we can update different things like TLS protocol, for example. As it stands today, you cannot configure TLS 1.3 in the old web admin GUI, but you can do it today in Navigator. So that might be a reason that you switch to using the Navigator-based kind of web administration piece. And there's some other, I won't step through this wizard because it's kind of yucky, but there's some other neat things about certificates in here where we've made it easier to find the certificate that you want to secure the server with and good stuff like that. So there's a lot more work to be done to pull in the whole suite of kind of web admin stuff into Navigator, but bits and pieces are coming in every single one of our quarterly PTFs. So that's a new thing. And I will say, in general, TLS is becoming increasingly important and getting more and more focus, at least from us when we're thinking about administration of servers. I don't know if anyone else has run into this, but if you try and go to an unsecure website in Chrome, it'll scream at you and say, this site is unsecure. Like, why are you going here? And then you have to click like 4 buttons in order to get back to the site. So even like the outside world is starting to realize that TLS is becoming like increasingly important. And so another new thing that we have done, let's click on Common 7.5, I'll pick on that one. This system is not secure, not using TLS. And so number one, I have this giant unlocked icon, which is letting me know that this connection is not encrypted, not using TLS. And then I have this warning message at the top that says this connection is not using TLS and you should go do that. And so we have tried to make it more obvious to you that as you're using Navigator, that you are either using secure connections or you're not. So this warning, I know kind of as a developer, warnings are like I open this up and I don't even really see it or read it. But hopefully as a system administrator, you're a little bit more aware that these warnings are popping up and taking a look at them. And this is where we can see whether or not these different connections I have to my managed nodes are TLS enabled or not. So we can see a couple of them are, which is good, and a lot of them aren't, which is not good. And another new thing that has come out in our Q4 PTF is this use TLS for all users. So if I come in as an all object user to Navigator and to this page, I can choose to set TLS for all users. It's going to give me the certificate that I'm using, put that in the Web Trust Store. And then now, if I were to hit save, every single person who logs into Navigator, just a plain user profile, other high authorized users, every single person, when they connect to this UT25BP19 from this GUI node, this UT25BP22, that connection will be secured. So if I click away from this, you can see that this other TLS enablement option is now kind of grayed out and off because I'm using what I kind of call it global TLS, but this like master switch to turn on TLS for everybody. So if you're an administrator and you want everybody to be running secured, now you have the ability to really force that onto people. Which
is there a reason why you would not recommend doing that? Maybe because of the browsers that they're using, or the OS that they're using? Why would I not want to come in here and open that, turn that on for every single connection?
There's no good reason that you should be running unsecured. You should be running secured. And every single person should be running secured. So this has kind of been a long time coming for us to create this kind of master switch for you to force all of your users to do this.
Perfect.
So that is a little bit about what is new, a little bit about security in general, TLS, but that's kind of a good segue into what we really want to get into today, which is system values a little bit, and then mostly audit journaling. Are there any questions on like high level overview before we kind of get really specific?
Anybody have any questions? This is a great opportunity to speak with one of the designers of Navigator. This is a great chance.
Yeah, feedback, positive or negative.
There's something in the chat. Oh, Glenn, you want to ask your question? Then I'll read the one in the chat after you.
Okay. You mentioned you don't have to run all those admin jobs on every partition, and you specifically said you don't necessarily have to do that on your production partition. So which partition do you prefer to run it on, if only on one of them?
I guess a partition where you're willing to take the hit of like the high CPU utilization of admin 1. So if you have like a test partition even, that would work to have admin 1 running, and then you can point that to your production system. It kind of depends on like your own setup and how many partitions you might have available, because of course we see customers who don't have big beefy systems and many different partitions where maybe some things are running, high job. One is like high utilization, one is low utilization, but pretty much any place where you don't mind taking that hit, if that answers your question.
So we have 5 partitions. One of them is a management partition. So we don't really run anything on there. So we run things on like 4 other servers. Should we put on the management partition?
Yeah, that would be a great option.
Yeah. So if I have it running right now on every partition, should I then take it off the other ones, like once I get it set up?
Yeah, so you can turn off the admin 1 server. I wouldn't say delete it, and I don't even think we really have a clean way to do that. But you can just end that server from running, and then it won't be spinning and doing whatever you need, because you can add all of those other 4 partitions to your list of nodes here. and just have it running. So this UT25 will be your managed system, and then these kind of 4 will be your other systems.
Thank you very much.
And one note about that when it comes to the other question about PTFs. So the managed system in your case would be the one where you need the latest HTTP group, you need the latest Java, you need the latest database PTFs. But then your managed nodes, you should also stay current on your database PTFs for your managed nodes, because when we make that JDBC connection, we're actually running that service on that managed node. So if you don't have the database PTF and you don't have that service on that managed node, obviously it's not going to work very well. So you should stay current on the database PTF for all nodes where you want to do anything with Navigator.
Cool. Thank you very much.
I have another question for you, Ann, please.
Sure.
The question says, all of my nodes have the TLS and enablement set on, and use TLS for all users is also on, but none of the locks are locked on the dashboard.
That sounds like a support case.
Okay. Possible.
I will say there's a couple different, when you hover over the unlock icon, sometimes it will say something along the lines of thinking about the TLS connection. So this says not encrypted, then this says TLS environment is active, and then there's one other thing that basically communicates that we're still trying to make the TLS connection. So it's possible you're looking at your dashboard at the exact instant where it's thinking about all of those TLS connections, which that's why I say it sounds like a support case, because I don't think you'd get so lucky to all have your systems be stuck in that waiting. So the other thing to look at is your certificates, and make sure that your certificates are up to date. They're not expired. There's no issue with the certificate itself, because if Navigator has an issue with the certificate that you specified to use, then we're just going to kind of choke and die.
Okay. And yet the other question I have here is someone's just making a comment more, is this looks like an Angular open source based design. Is that what you're working with, I should say?
Yeah, so we take advantage of PrimeNG, which is the kind of UI framework, the component framework that we use on top of Angular to build the Navigator look.
Was there any particular reason why IBM chose to go that route? Is it just because of the speed or the support, or do you know what the reasoning was for that?
When we think about open source, a lot of times it's the stability of the package and the reputation of the package, and so that's a pretty popular one. Maybe, I know that was a little bit before my time on the project too, so somebody liked the look of it and it met all of IBM's hard requirements on open source, would be my guess.
No, I think it looks very clean and it has a very nice bounce to it, so I'm glad that they're using it.
Mm-hmm. Certainly makes my life easier. I don't have to write nearly as much CSS.
Exactly. Okay. Oh, one more message. Let me see the message is. What is the name of the open source again?
PrimeNG.
Okay. PrimeNG.
Yeah, prime like prime number. NG like abbreviation for Angular.
Got it. Mm.
Quick question regarding the admin. So do you save resources by stopping them on the other partitions, or will it use the same amount of resource on the admin or the partition where it runs, if I understood my question?
Yeah, I think so. I guess to parrot it
I mean,
back.
if I had 10 partitions and the admin runs on all 10 partitions, it would take certain resources, right? If I turn it off on 9 of them and keep it on 1, but manage the other 9 from that, would it be more efficient or save any resources?
Yes, it would, because you don't have just this server kind of sitting around and spinning, waiting for something to happen when you're just not going to use it. So if you're never going to open up Navigator, then why have it run on those partitions, especially now where you can manage all the other ones from one spot. There's really no reason to have it sitting there and waiting to do something if you don't have to. So yeah,
I think this was a really, really good hidden gem. This was really good. I'm going to spread the word about this.
Good.
Cool. Thanks.
And do you want to shift over to maybe how we maintain or look at system values?
Yeah, let's do that. Right, so we're going to be under the security icon now. And one of the first places I want to start is with the security configuration info. And this is a nice dashboard page. If we look at the SQL, this is coming from the security info service as well as the network attribute service joined together. And this is a place where you can just see a bunch of different security related information. So some of this is system value based. Some of this is like SST, DST type of stuff. That's another note. In the old version of Navigator, you could work with DST things, but we took that out because for one thing, we got some feedback that nobody was really using it. And two, if nobody's using it, it's a huge pain in our butt from a security perspective to have to deal with DST from a GUI. So you can't do that anymore. So if you're ever looking at a system value and you have to change it from SST or DST, the option to change it would be grayed out. But so the security configuration kind of aggregates a bunch of different information for you. So we can see security level, but we're mostly going to be talking about audit. So if I filter on audit, we can see some of the specific information about auditing. So auditing control, the auditing level, and then some of the kind of the extended system values. So this is one way to just see flat out what the different system values are set to from a security perspective. Another way I could get at the same thing would be to go to system, and then I have to find it. Maybe it's, configuration and service system values. And then here we have all of our system values that are broken up into these different categories. So performance, if we look at the right, then we can see the list of the different Q blah, blah, blah system values that are actually there. And so auditing, we can see we're going to be looking at QAud control, QAud level, and whatever else is there. So two ways so far to get to what we want to look at. And if I click on auditing properties, now this is really the meat of what I want to show. And this auditing configuration page, I could get there by going through system values or through security, audit journal, and then auditing configuration would take me to this page as well. Now, if you have any experience with auditing in the past, you know that it's quite a pain and it's really a green screen thing. There's historically has not been an interface where you can really configure auditing in an easy way and then actually take advantage of the stuff that gets produced in the audit journal. And that is one of the things that we wanted to address in this new version of Navigator. And thanks to some of the changes in services, we have the ability to generate these really interesting pages, which I'll get into, that can take advantage of the information in your audit journal, which is really, really powerful. But in order to do that, we have to make sure that our system values and everything are set up so that we are auditing as we expect. And that's what this page tries to demystify. The top panel here is for auditing control, which is controlled with this QAud control system value. And that's really your yes or no switch as to if you have auditing turned on or not. We can see on this system, I have this checkbox for enable action auditing, and that would put the star odd level value into that system value. And so that is checked, which means that this system is configured to do auditing. If I close this, we can see the auditing action table. And this kind of demystifies what would be in the QAud level and the QAud level 2 system values. And those are really, there's just so much to them packed into like 2 system values. And so that's why we have this table view instead. These auditing actions on the left-hand side, these are the values that you would actually put into one of those system values. And then this middle column for audit journal entry types, that is the stuff that you're actually going to see in the QAud journal. So two different things that you kind of have to marry together to understand, okay, if I put star create, what am I actually going to get? And so that's kind of what this table is showing us. And on the right-hand side, this enabled option is just showing us if we have that turned on or not. So on this system, we are generating authority failure type information, create, delete, all of that good stuff is being audited as we kind of scroll down and look, security stuff. And then a bunch of other stuff is just kind of turned off on the system for now.
And the question is, when you enable any one of these values here, when does it take effect? Immediately? Something else you need to do, or is it just once you hit that slide bar, it immediately starts taking effect?
Correct. It immediately starts taking effect. So I hit this for StarNet Secure. Navigator goes off and changes whichever system value it needs to, whether it's QoD level or QoD level 2, and it'll put StarNet Secure in there. And now as you do secure network connection type things, you'll start generating these SK entry types in your audit journal. So it's immediate.
As they occur.
Yeah. But it's up to you to generate them. So when I test this, sometimes it's hard to get these things to actually happen because these different audit journal entry types, they fire at for different reasons. And so we'll get into that as well. You'll notice a few of them have these caret icons next to them. So if I drop down on security, for example, this star security value is kind of an aggregation of these other more specific values like star sec config, star sector server. And if we look in the audit journal entry types, we can kind of see that the star security is a big long list of different entry types, but then these other ones are a little bit more specific. So maybe you have some sort of use case where you would want to turn star security off and then turn on each one of these individually. That's a potential. I would say for the most part, you probably want star security itself to be on, can still get the most amount of these different audit journal entry types. And you can see if you're really looking at my screen right now, you'll notice that this is not even, this star security has more entry types than the sum of all these sub ones. So maybe there's some IBMI history on, the star security came after the star sec config. I'm not sure, but that's another thing that we've tried to demystify as we are looking at the configuration page.
But just to be clear, it's better just to go with the all-encompassing one and get everything, even if you don't have those events, just so you have them, it's monitoring for them, I should say.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Now, I'm looking at a system that has already been set up for auditing at some point, but what if I am not? So this is a system that is not, and I'll come down to auditing configuration. And we'll notice that my switch is not on. And if I just do a quick scroll, okay, well, we do have some stuff turned on. So somebody must have been doing some sort of auditing on this system, but for whatever reason, our big switch is not turned on. So say I come in here and I'm just looking at this. If I try to flip one of these buttons to enable the collection of authority failure information, Navigator is going to detect that you don't have all the stuff that you need to in the background set up to actually do auditing. And so this dialog will walk you through the different steps that you need to do to get started. There's only one thing that requires user intervention, really, and that is what library you want to put your journal receiver in. So I'll put it in audit lib. And we'll notice that audit lib doesn't exist on my system right now, but Navigator will also go out and create that library for me and then create the journal receiver. It'll create the journal, QoD journ and Qsys, and then it'll change QoD control to odd level, and that's our big switch. So if I hit OK, we get some happy messages. And then it remembered that I was turning on authority failures and did that. And since we already had some stuff pre-configured, that has remained pre-configured as well. And this is all set up to handle errors gracefully. So if you already have the QOD journ created but no journal receiver, we'll handle that. If QOD control is already kind of flipped, then we'll handle that. So it makes it really easy for you to start auditing for the first time, or maybe come back to auditing if it's been turned off for some sort of reason, and take advantage of the stuff that's getting put in that audit journal.
And just to be clear, and even though some of those individual ones were turned on, without that big switch being turned on, nothing is happening.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Which is why the big switch gets its own
big switch,
big panel on the top.
What authority are you running? What authority do you need on your profile to have access to all these different screens? You might have said it already, but it's another question I just got.
That's a good question. So a couple things. I'm running with a high authorized user right now. That's just an all object that makes my life easier for demo. Navigator is secured with a couple function usage IDs. If I just switch to that, and I type in nav here, this whole list from here on up are the different function usage IDs that control access to these different left-hand menus. And so all function is our big switch for if you can even log into Navigator. By default, that is denied unless you have all object authority. So for one thing, you have to be in this function usage ID in order to get into Navigator. And then you need to have access to all of these left-hand menu related function usage IDs, which by default are shipped as allowed. So if you can get in and just log in, then you can get in and see everything. And then permission falls on your user profile. So if a service requires you to have a special authority, or you don't have access to an object or a file or a library or whatever the case may be, Navigator will not show you whatever that is that you're looking at. So we fall back on kind of the operating system security and however you have your system secured to show you all of these pages. So 2 layers. Hopefully that answers the question and makes sense, because it's kind of a big topic within itself.
Absolutely, but it's nice that it is that granular, so you can have different people having different roles to maintain it, I suppose. If that's a good use case, I'm not quite sure, but that would.
Right. So if you have somebody who's doing network stuff, for example, and they have like IO sysconfig special authority, maybe you want them to come into Navigator and be able to do the network stuff, but the network stuff only. And so that's where that function usage ID for the IBM Nav network would come into play, and they wouldn't be able to see or do anything else.
Right. So that's a very good use case right there.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right, where were we?
I didn't mean to bring you down a rabbit hole, but it was the question that had come up.
No, it's good. Security is the theme of the day.
It sure is.
All right, I think we're all done with configuration. I'm going to switch back to a more interesting system.
Yeah, you were showing us different turning on the big switch for the QOD journ and some of the related lesser ones underneath it. Before I threw that curveball at you.
So let's just look. I'm on Common 7.5 now. This is a pretty interesting system. There's a lot of stuff going on. We can see this one has auditing turned on to the max, as I like to say, because we have all 3 of these things turned on. And then if we scroll through our table, we can see we have kind of the popular audit journal entry types selected: authority failures, creates, deletes, security. Oh, security is not on, but some of these sub ones are on, so that's good. That is our configuration piece, but what do we actually do with this information that we're generating in our journal? And that is this audit journal entries page. So right away when I came here, we have the option to select between a couple different views. I'm going to gloss over this first choice for a second. We'll come back to that. But then you have 2 different options for views. You have chart view and then you have detail view. So chart view is going to show you graphs. Detail view is going to show you a table. Then within chart view, you will have another option for daily view or weekly view. So let's just hit OK. I'm on daily view. Let me close this so we can see a little bit better. This daily view is generating a bar chart of the audit journal entry counts just for today. So if I look at this SQL, it's this is what I call hairy SQL because it's longer than 3 lines. I don't
3 lines is decent error. Okay.
I don't write a lot of SQL clearly, but we're pulling from the QSys2 display journal and kind of aggregating it into these bars. And now on this system, we can see I have 0 authority failures today, which is good. And then I have 5,800 password failures today. That's maybe not so good. But maybe this is my first time looking at auditing information on this system, so I really have no idea if 5,800 is normal or not. So I can use the weekly view, and that is going to generate a line graph of those counts over time. This kind of thinks for a second sometimes. So authority failures, we can see that sits at 0. That's good for the last week. And here on password failures, we can see some sort of spike. So actually, like maybe, I don't know. I don't even know what I would say is normal for this system based on looking at this graph. But we can see on the 4th, we had a spike up to 22,000 password failures on this system. So that's pretty crazy.
And that's being produced just by using the entries that are in the journal.
Yes, exactly. So if I look at this SQL, this is still using display journal where I'm looking at the PW, and you can see I'm getting a count.
Which makes
over
sense.
These
Right.
dates.
Sure.
So this would be cause for concern, probably, if we're looking at the 4th and we have this spike up to 22,000. And that is where our last view, the detail view, comes into play. So I'll go back to the view configuration and I'll hit detail view. I know I want to look at password entries, and I know I want to look at the 4th, which is a Saturday. That's suspicious. Now
Now you're drilling in?
Yeah, now I'm drilling in. So this is going to actually run the SysTools audit journal insert your entry type here service. And so there are, I don't know, maybe 90 or so of these different audit journal entry types, which is what we saw on the configuration page in that middle column. And we have created a corresponding service for maybe like 70% of them. And we've tried to choose the entry types that are the most interesting to actually look at. And we're about done with our list of what we think we need a service for. But if you are looking at a specific entry type and that one is really important to you, please let us know and we can start working on a service to correspond to that so you can take advantage of this stuff in Navigator as well. So here, just to expand on that, there's our SysTools Audit Journal PW that we're using to look at this information. So now we can try and figure out why we have 22,000 of these password failures. Now, if you were to look at the green screen version of this, you'd be looking at this weird screen where there's like 2 character codes kind of sporadically in this square, which is obviously not very friendly compared to this, where we can actually see this detailed information about what occurred at this timestamp and why this audit journal entry was generated. Now, this violation type is kind of a sub-reason for the password failure entry in the first place. So we have all of these different reasons why the audit entry was created. If I just do a quick glance, we can see all of these are U, and U corresponds to username is not valid.
Can I just interject
that in the
here?
detail?
somebody with knowledge of this particular system is saying that this particular system is attached to the internet and is getting a lot of these requests, these constant attack requests because it's open to the internet. I guess that would explain all these different unauthorized attempts.
Right. Yeah. So right away we can see there's a lot of attacks on this root profile. So people across who even knows where, across all of these different remote addresses are trying to log into this system, which is publicly accessible with the root profile, which doesn't exist, which is good. But then you see things like admin and user, and you can start to see the different usernames that people are trying to use to access this system. So let's actually filter out root because there's too many of them. And
that might be the vast majority of them right there. Root.
Yeah. So if you look at that down at the bottom, we were at 22,000 rows for this day. And now that we filtered, we've dropped down to 6,000. So that's a lot of entries just on the root profile, which doesn't even exist. But now we see more of the admin, user, and then I like to look at this. It's kind of fun to see Hadoop, the different things that people think might be available on this system and trying to run with. And then you'll see people who are actually just failing to enter their passwords. Sometimes you'll see one of your friends show up as well. So you can catch them in the act. Shell. One of my personal favorites, I was doing a live demo and Minecraft popped up as one of the usernames in this list. So I don't know who thinks that we're running Minecraft on power servers. We talk about it in the lab, but it's kind of fun to see the different things that people are trying to do.
Couple of questions, Ann?
Yeah.
Can you, for that filter, I know you eliminated root, but can you eliminate more than one or filter just entries for one particular, more than one user, or is it always just one at a time?
So it is just one at a time right now. But if you were to take this SQL, you can see we've actually put the filter into the SQL. So you could run this in VS Code and then start to do, where username, not like root, admin, whatever you want to do. So that is something that we need to enhance for this filter field for sure in Navigator.
Yeah, but the fact that you can just copy and paste it and then do whatever you want with it, I mean, that alone gives you a lot of power of just doing that as a workaround.
Right. Yeah. You have a really good jumping off place to do a lot of advanced filtering just within the SQL.
And what you're showing us here, Ann, is this a newer PTF? Is this Q3, Q4? Or does it go before then?
No. So this auditing stuff has actually been there for a while, probably about a year and a half. So the services have existed for a while as well. Some of them are like just 7.4 and 7.5. Some of them do go back to 7.3. The SQL service documentation lists that out super clearly. But the Navigator portion of this has been around for a while.
Right.
But it's always being enhanced. I'm always working on this.
Sure. You think maybe we'd be able to actually edit that window with the SQL and just edit it right there and have a new payload come from the service?
Edit this?
Yeah, instead of just view, make that editable. I'm just dreaming out loud. Someone put that in the chat as well.
Yeah, that is a request we get a lot, just the ability to run any sort of SQL and have it generate a table or run a CL command and have it spit out information. But that is a big potentially a big security hole. And so for us to do something like that, we need to do it properly. So it takes a lot of time on our end to make sure that we have those holes closed up. We have not committed to doing that in any sense, but it is something that we think about and we hear often. So it's definitely on the list of things to consider.
Well, given the power of what you can do with SQL, if you have this window, think about what you can do right from there. It's pretty impressive what you can do.
Yeah.
Pretty powerful. Okay. Thank you, Ann, for elaborating on that.
Mm-hmm. I will say on the filter question, if I want to filter like this specific IP address, which we can see a bunch, I can filter on that and where username is not like root. So here we have 2. But if the question was if I could do like root comma admin, something like that, that would not work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, multiple parameters within multiple compound select or where, whatever.
Yeah, that's on the to-do list for sure. So this is how we can start kind of interrogating the audit journal and get some interesting information back in this table form and start to see what might be going on. So now we're down to 69 rows. So 69 times this IP address tried to attack this system with username not being root. So hopefully you don't have 22,000 password failures on your own system if you go and look at this.
I sure hope not. And just going back to the very thing in the one-on-one discussion from when we first started, of course, you can customize the screen as far as moving columns around and maybe sorting different columns, things like that.
Yes, definitely. And so if I go back to this 3 columns menu, again, we have a laundry list of columns that are available from this service. So this is where I think the customization of your screen gets really, really powerful, because we've worked with experts like Carol, and she says these are the columns that you need for just anyone who wants to get started with this. And obviously she knows what she's talking about, but you might be really into this as well, and you might care about the job name, the program name, the object ASP name, other things like that. And these list of columns change depending on what audit journal entry you're looking at. So if I go to create objects, for example, now you can see we're looking at a completely different set of information where we are seeing new objects are being created. And this was some access log that was created on the 4th. And so now we have a completely different set of columns that might be interesting to you or not. And if you ever get like so screwed up and you just want to reset, if you reset to default and hit OK, that is going to change the ordering of the columns, which you might have noticed, and the columns that are actually selected. So you'll get back to what we thought was the best idea for the columns that you might want to see, which can be helpful.
Excellent.
So that is kind of how you dive into the details of auditing. I want to move on to, this is a newer thing, the data mart. When we were looking at the audit journal entries and diving into those detail views, on this system, it actually came back pretty fast. And let me switch so we can actually look at something interesting. There we go. But if you have a really large system where a lot of things are happening all of the time and you've turned auditing on to the max, so you're generating all sorts of entry types, your audit journal can really balloon into this giant thing. And when we try and query against it from Navigator, it can get really, really slow. And nobody likes to just sit on a screen and wait for it to spin and load, especially if you're diving into this detailed information. I mean, I can only keep like 3 things in my head at once. And so by the time it loads, I probably forgot what I was trying to do in the first place. And that is why what this audit journal data mart was kind of born for. The audit journal data mart is on one hand a performance improvement for Navigator when we look at audit journal information, and it's also kind of a historical way for you to save information from the audit journal into a different place, and then you can query against that place yourself. You don't even have to use Navigator, and then you can clean up your audit journal so it's not taking up all of its space and has all of its overhead. So that's kind of the broad thing of data mart. Why did we create this in the first place? But what did we actually create? Data mart is 2 SQL services, really. And what it does is it allows you to create these just regular old database files that have a specific subset of the audit journal information in them so that you can query against them, like I said before. The service, the one half of the service is this audit journal data mart info. which is what we're looking at in this table view. And this is just kind of a metadata table about the different audit journal data marts that might exist on your system. But the real meat of this is in a service called Manage Audit Journal Data Mart, qsys2.manage audit journal data mart. And that will allow you to create and modify these different data mart tables. So let's just go ahead and walk through that. The parameters are the library, the entry type that you want to create the data mart for, which, let's see, to see what I already have available. Let's make one for that PW. And then you can specify the action. Right now I'm on the Create New Data Mart dialog in Navigator. So my only option is to create a new data mart, but we can see the other options in a second. And then you can specify the starting timestamp and the ending timestamp. So we have this long phrase for basically what amounts to find the oldest stuff on my system, the oldest journal receiver, and just start from there. Or you can specify a specific value. So maybe I want to start with everything from January 1st to today. And then a new enhancement in the latest TR, and then this is available in our fourth quarter PTF for Navigator as well, is this data mart filter. And this is where you could really kind of go crazy on limiting your data mart table to a specific set of information. So I could say where username not like root. But this is some sort of SQL statement that I am going to add to the data mart table, and I have to be able to write good SQL here. And so as you can see, Navigator is not really helping you write that SQL as it stands today. And this is secure. It's not going to allow for SQL injection or any bad stuff to be executed when you're creating this data mart table. And I think if I hit OK, yeah, I screwed up my SQL off the top of my head, but we can see some examples of that below. But that went off and tried to create this data mart table, audit journal PW, in my AEC SLO library. So if we look down the list here, in my own library, I have a data mart for AF entries. I have one for PW entries. And then this other user has a data mart in a different library for the CO entries. So data mart tables, again, are just database files. So you can have them in lots of different libraries. You can have multiple data marts for the same entry in different libraries. So the uniqueness here is the library and the journal entry type that you specified. So I couldn't have two AF data marts in my AEC SLO library. If I scroll over, we'll see some more information about the last run to that qsys2 manage audit journal data mart for that library and entry type. So we can see the starting timestamp and ending timestamp that were specified, when that call started and finished, the job, and then if it failed, it'll tell us why it failed. So this one that I just failed to create, we can see because I screwed up my SQL. But sometimes you'll see, okay, the data mart table already exists in this library or some other reason.
Another question came in on that filtering with the from and to dates. And we noticed that there's a time on there. You can change the time as well, just to confirm, right? If you're looking just for a certain band of time, 12 minutes or whatever it happens to be. Oh, okay, there it is in the bottom.
Yeah, there we go. When we open the calendar, little calendar icon, you can do this. Or you can just, sometimes that's irritating, you can just type in 5:15, for example.
Okay. This is amazing. This is such, I think, potentially underused by so many shops, and it's such a powerful tool.
Yeah. I mean, auditing in general, sometimes I have people raise their hands, like how many of you have auditing turned on? And then that's usually most of the room. And then how many people look at the audit journal? And then like 3 people out of the whole room raise their hand, which is kind of scary because auditing and security is so important. And if you have this on, but you're not using it, like what's the point of taking up all the space on your system. So now you can actually take advantage of the audit journal. And then the data mart really opens you up to the possibilities of querying against these tables and doing all sorts of things with them. We know when we think about AI and cloud and connecting the IBMI to those types of technologies, the data mart is just a file that you can query with SQL, which that is going to be a lot easier for some sort of third-party technology to understand than something very specific like the journal for IBMI. So the options with the data mart are really kind of unlimited here.
And
So
go
ahead.
I was going to say, but when you mentioned earlier, I think over 90 different entry types, that I can't think of anything else that's on the system. I mean, that's not being monitored. It cannot be monitored right now. It's really amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Couple other questions that are coming up. Can we export to a security information event management, SIEM? And data from the data mart? Can we export this information?
Export. In Navigator, no, we don't have the ability to just export the file itself into some other place right now. If I go back to the audit journal entries, let's just pick AF. Oh, I don't have anything in AF. That's not helpful.
But is it a fair question that if it's because it's SQL, I can take the same SQL statement and run it and then capture the data that way?
Yes, exactly. And you can export whatever you have in this table view into a CSV. Obviously, I have nothing, so I'm not even going to open it. But that's not exactly your question, but that is my answer.
That's good. It's okay. I mean, the fact that it gives you the SQL is a really good workaround for many of these.
Yeah, yeah. And we do kind of hide the SQL that we're running for this managed data mart. If I go to schedule, let's just go here and I'll blow this up so we can actually read it. This is the meat of what we are doing here, this manage audit journal data mart. And obviously if you Google this, you'll find our documentation with examples and you can see the different parameters and how to craft that SQL.
Perfect.
All right, so
there are some notes in the chat saying that people are saying they underestimate how important the value of this. This is significantly helpful if you're trying to solve some kind of security issue, whatever it happens to be.
Yes, yeah, especially that ability to filter for the data mart and really craft the view of information. So I'm starting to get like excited and ahead of myself a little bit. But if we were to, so let's go back. Let's forget about this managed data mart. This is actually kind of answers that other question about filtering on multiple things. So, okay, let's say we have our data mart. We've created this beautiful table that has this filter. I am back in my audit journal entries page. And now we can go back to looking at this first option for live data or data mart. Now, if I click on data mart, it's going to give me the different data mart libraries where I have these tables. So I'll choose AE CISLA, and it knows that I have a authority failure data mart in that library. So I can select the detail view, and this is not interesting because there's no data, but that is going to spit out whatever is in that data mart table. We can see this indication that now I am using data mart, AE CISLA, instead of the live data, which is coming from the service. So if I look at that SQL, we can see, okay, I'm selecting from AE CISLA Audit Journal AF instead of that sys-tools. So if you want to do some really powerful filtering, you can create your data mart, set the filter for the data mart itself. Now you have this table that only has those types of entries, and then you can come back into Navigator, point your view to your data mart table, and then just do the Navigator filtering from the interface. And there you go. Life is good. You're looking at some very specific audit journal information.
That's excellent. That really is excellent.
Yeah, that's why I was getting excited. That's pretty cool. All right, what else can we do with this? I will click on my AE Audit Journal AF and let's go to manage. So this is kind of the rest of the meat of the things that you can do with that service. There's a couple different actions here. Append new data to the existing data mart table. So you can create this table. Maybe I had one for 2024. And every month I can come in and append last month's data to my data mart table. So it becomes this kind of giant aggregation of all of the months of the year. For the starting timestamp, we created a special value, which will go ahead and calculate the last timestamp in your data mart table and then use that as the starting point. So you don't have to go and figure out what the last thing in your data mart is. We'll go ahead and do that for you. And then you can set your ending timestamp. Then we have the option to delete and create a new one. So now that it's 2025, this would probably be a good thing for me to do. Just wipe out everything that is in the data mart table, and then I can start building my kind of collection of AF entries for 2025 if that's what I'm doing. And then another cleanup mechanism is delete entries from the table. So we have two different deletes. This one is actually going to delete a time range in the table itself, but keep the table. And then if I exit out and delete, then this will delete the entire table itself. Now, a note on kind of the security of these tables itself. They are public exclude when we create them. And since I am the person running the managed procedure, I am going to own the table. But then it is up to you to manage the permissions to these tables. So maybe you are doing this for a couple different people, a couple of your friends, and they want to use the data mart option in the other pages for audit journaling in Navigator. You would need to go in and give them access to these different data mart tables that you created if they're not a high authorized user. And running the Manage Audit Journal Data Mart service and looking at this metadata table requires that you have audit special authority on your profile, this is kind of modeled after that copy audjourn CL command, which also requires audit. So we decided to be consistent with our security policy. But here in Navigator, I have this nice little way that I can add users to the permissions list. So I can add my user profile has maybe changed, for example. Hit OK, and now I just added permissions to that file. So we make it easy for you. That part, although we make you manage it yourself. The rest of the options here are just hot links into the views that we've already seen. So all three of those views, the table view and then the two chart views, can use the data mart data instead of using the live data. And then the last one here is schedule. So like I was saying, if I want to add last month's on the first of the month, I can schedule this to run. And that will generate the SQL that it actually needs to call. And then this is going to add a scheduled job, just the basic job scheduler that IBM has. And I can schedule that to run whenever I want. Now, we do get requests like, oh, I don't use the basic job scheduler, I use advanced job scheduler. And in Navigator, we do have the ability to work with the advanced job scheduler under the work management icon. And this is 100% completed as of our Q4 PTF. So everything that you have ever wanted to do with AGS, you can now do through the new Navigator. So I do have a to-do to add the ability to schedule with AGS to this data mart page as well. So that'll be coming. But that is data mart. So really, like I showed, a really powerful way to query against the audit journal and start to actually take advantage of what's inside of it.
And they're here to stay. That's going to just keep getting expanded on as time passes on.
Yes, yes, because yeah, the data mart filter, that was a new enhancement. The data mart itself, that was available in the spring TR in 2024. The filtering came in the fall TR. So whatever, I have a whole list of things that we can do to make this even better and even more useful. And as people take advantage of it, we love to hear feedback as to what you think might make this better and what you need. And we definitely take that into account as we think of what we need to do next.
And I know there are good resources online that people can read about. What's the best way to do this? Just get in there and start using it, or is there a resource? I know IBM does have some help online with this, but is that a better strategy just to go in and start playing with it, or what do you think?
Well, I think since, you're either here today or you're watching the recording and you're seeing this, you have the wizard's guide to how to take advantage of it. And so if you do what I've done today and kind of walk through these different pages, you'll become kind of the same level of expert that I am on how to use this. We do have written documentation on our Navigator wiki that has just some screenshots and kind of says the same thing that I've been telling you today. But I would say just go play. I mean, go dive in and see what's in your audit journal. I mean, you might not even know what you have until you kind of come in here and look at that weekly view and figure out when your spikes are or find authority failures on programs that you didn't know were happening. So just go start tearing into these different audit journal entries and see what you can see.
It can be very eye-opening.
Yes. Yeah.
Very eye-opening. But that's the purpose of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know it. When this first GA'd, the next day we got a support case and they said, well, Navigator is throwing these AF entries on this specific directory. And it's like, oh man, I shot myself in the foot by giving you guys the ability to go find where sometimes we make mistakes and generate audit journal entries.
Wow. That's okay. I mean, but
okay.
You got that one wrapped up pretty quickly, I imagine.
Yes, definitely. But it was funny to see somebody pointing my own finger back at me.
That's okay. That's perfect. It's software. That's okay. Excellent. And you are the wizard. You've wowed everybody in this meeting today. That's such a powerful tool, and watching somebody with your expertise, manage it and use it really was a real refreshing time, and just a great thing to watch you do this. I mean, it's amazing to me what great ease you have just going through this tool. It's really amazing. It's fascinating to watch.
Well, I mean, it is that easy. I mean, like you mentioned in the beginning, I've been with IBM for 4 years, and so I am in no way an expert on IBMI or even auditing, but this tool, Navigator, it makes things much easier. You no longer have to rely on the green screen to manage your IBMI and look at things. I mean, these left-hand menus are full of very useful things that you can do through a GUI interface. And so I like to say Navigator is not just for system administrators. That's definitely our target audience. But if you're a developer, there's also interesting things that you can do in Navigator. So it's a good thing to come in here and kind of check out what we have going on, because our team is just so busy with new things that are coming out every single quarter. And we're all very excited to be working on different ways to make IBMI easier to use.
Wow. This is a giant leap for sure. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I think we might want to leave it here. Does anybody have any questions before we finally wrap this up?
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for everyone who stuck around. Glad to share any tidbit of Navigator.
You and I were
and if you have any questions
before this meeting,
feel free to reach out, send me an email, send me a LinkedIn,
how are we going to fill the time? And
whatever it may be, I'm happy to
it seems like we've just
help.
scratched the surface here. Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I could talk about Navigator probably all day.
Well, anyway, some of the comments that are coming in the chat here. Many thanks, Ann. Many nice additions to make it friendlier. We all appreciate your hard work, which is really nice to hear. Always fun to attend. This is all good stuff. So thank you, Ann, for your time today. It's so great.